Great. Thanks everybody for being here today. We'll just give folks a moment or two to join in with us here. All right. Hope everyone's having a nice day here. It's just Tuesday. It feels like Wednesday, but we're just plugging away here. Welcome everyone to the NBDA Retailer University webinar series. Today is Tuesday, March 4th, 2025, and our topic today is hugging the porcupine, competing and winning against direct-to-consumer e-bike brands. And we're very excited to welcome our three special guest presenters, Richard Wittenberg of Troxus Mobility, Rob Kaplan of Bulls Bikes, and Tim Akers of Akers Digital Marketing. Thank you all for being here today.
For having us.
We are thrilled to have three industry experts in this room, a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, to share their expertise and advice on the new reality of driving foot traffic into your store. They'll discuss effective digital marketing strategy, how the direct-to-consumer brands can be impactful traffic drivers to your store, and how to leverage the sale of a DTC brand into a higher profit opportunity. This is really valuable info, and we hope it will be helpful and actionable for everyone watching. Just before we begin, a few tips for Zoom participation during today's webinar. We encourage questions and participation in today's event. Please feel free to place your questions in the chat. The bottom of your Zoom window is a little chat button. There's also a Q&A function since today is a panel webinar meeting. You can pop those in there, and at the end, we do have time set aside to address these. So we'll make sure we get to your questions, and our presenters have also kindly shared their contact info as well. If your question doesn't get answered or you'd love to follow up with them, you are more than welcome to. Another tip and request, please place your name and your shop name or business and state in your Zoom name feature so that we can identify you and just recognize each other. And to do so, on the top of your kind of Zoom icon photo, there's three dots. Click that, hit rename, and just put in your name, shop or business, and your state. We appreciate it. So again, thanks to everyone for being here today. Richard, can you share some background on your role at Troxus Mobility with us?
Sure. So I'm the CEO of Troxus Mobility. I've been in the bike industry all of my adult life, which is 41 years, and I started pushing a broom in a bike shop. So I've kind of heard a lot of these same questions and concerns through waves of popularity of bicycles over the last 40 years, and would love to share some of my insights with the group out there and hopefully save some pain and help make some extra money.
I love that experience. I think a lot of us can relate to pushing a broom to industry careers. So thank you so much. And Rob, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your role at Bulls Bikes USA?
Sure. Thanks, Megan. Rob Kaplan, head of sales and marketing at Bulls Bikes. Bulls is a dealer-centric premium e-bike supplier. We sell exclusively Bosch-powered e-bikes in the Americas. Bulls in Germany is actually owned by a dealer cooperative, so very unique in the business. Like Richard, I've been in the business my entire career, started working in a bike shop when I was, gosh, about 13 years old. So over 45 years. And like Richard, look forward to sharing some information and hopefully helping a little bit. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob. And Tim, welcome. Can you tell us about your company and experience in the industry?
Sure. My name is Tim Akers. I'm the founder of Akers Digital. We are a digital marketing agency that works in advertising, email, SEO, websites for outdoor brands. Some of the brands we work with are, Yakima Racks, iCamper, Rotor Bikes, Eno, and a whole bunch of others. I too, started in bike shops. I call it the frozen tundra of New York State. So way north of Lake Placid. It gets cold up there, but I was working in shops up there. And then also worked at Competitive Cyclist, Backcountry.com, and a few other industry companies before starting Akers Digital.
Awesome. Thank you all. We've got a lot of experience in this room, so really appreciate all of you being here. And I also love hugging the porcupine. I love the logo. We've got actual porcupines now. It's a humorous way to address and, can we say, embrace the reality of DTC brands, particularly in the e-bike space. So there are new rules today, but there are also new ways to succeed too. Can you share what inspired you all to hug the porcupine and face these challenges with a positive mindset?
Well, I guess, when we look at this, you know, I think all of us here, Tim has this very unique perspective of really building a business around direct to consumer sales earlier in his career. And I found working with him over the years has got some very unique insights into that. And I think, Rob has been, spending the better part of his career with various brands, working on with retailers and, how do we navigate shifts in distribution and outlets? And, I think they both bring a very unique perspective there. For me, it's really as the CEO of an e-bike brand that is directly competing with some of the biggest direct-to-consumer brands here. We're really focused on how do we provide value to the retailer to help them compete and be profitable in this segment, which is the fastest growing segment of the industry right now. So I'm not sure, Megan, if this would be an appropriate time to sort of launch into the presentation, or would you want to add some more direct questions first?
I'd say that's a great segue, centering the retailers. So absolutely, please begin your presentation.
Okay, great. So again, what's a porcupine and what does hugging the porcupine mean anyway? And I have to give homage to Blair Clark, who in a recent article that he did with Bicycle Retailer talked about hugging the porcupine in relationship to direct to consumer more around the Canyon brand than around e-bikes. But I thought it was important that, we kind of take a look back and where does that expression come from? And it was the title of a book by Dr. Audrey Decker, who basically created coping strategies for dealing with sort of prickly people or difficult individuals that you need to work with. And I sort of see that, any sort of counter uh, uh, effort towards brick and mortar retailer as something that we have to look at, something we have to figure out, and then figure out, how do we compete? How do we use it to our advantage? And how do we make sure that we make friends with it as much as we can in order to help drive the needs of our business and our route to market? So, it all comes down to, why would we even want to try to hug a porcupine in the first place? Why don't you just let it go its own way? And I think, well, one of us, we're all thrill seekers on some level, right? That's why we're entrepreneurs and we're in business, right? We don't like the easy path necessarily, but I would argue that, you would hug a porcupine because it's standing between something or someone you want to be associated with, or the porcupine has something you need or you want. And that using that porcupine and hugging it to get what you need is what success is all about, right? Control the things you can control, accept the things you can't, and have the wisdom to know the difference between the two of those. So let's go back, and our whole conversation today is really about a sales pipeline that you need to create for your business. So again, I don't mean to be, you know, to state the obvious here, but just like a coach, even if you're an expert at your sport, and I'm sure we have many great retailers out there that are saying, oh, of course, but it never hurts to be coached in just the basics of what creates a successful sales pipeline. One is, the stages are awareness, interest, consideration, and decision. Right? Awareness is typically what we call the top of the marketing funnel. That's where people may not even know what an e-bike is. And we have to thank the direct-to-consumer e-bike brands who, during the pandemic, really opened up our eyes to many, many more people than normally would have been exposed to e-bikes, and really provided them the opportunity to understand what an e-bike is and get involved with this. And that was created by huge marketing spends in the digital marketing space when everybody was locked in their house. searching on their phones for 8 hours or 16 hours a day. Then you kind of get from the awareness of, okay, it exists, to interest. Okay, well, now I'm really kind of thinking about maybe that's something I want to do this summer. Then consideration is, yeah, I'm going to do this, but I'm trying to consider and understand classes of e-bikes. Where do I want to buy my e-bike? How do I want to do it? And then decision is, all right, I am going to pull the trigger today and I'm going to do that. Right. So, one of the things we need to look at is that our direct to consumer e-bike brand partner have done a great job of filling the top of that funnel. But they do a less than adequate job in the bottom two steps, and especially that last step. Because as you'll see as we go through the presentation, that decision-making process is the fundamental control point that you have in that interaction with a consumer. Because you are the final mile, you control that. And take direct-to-consumer e-bikes out of it. But for your business to thrive and prosper going forward, you have got to control the decision-making process within your store. And really, if we're going to talk about the theme of hugging the porcupine, it's really how are we going to effect change on the store floor to help you make money and convert sales. So, if I'd say, what does this have to do with selling e-bikes? And I think, when we talk about it, I'm going to let Rob take over for a little bit because he's got a lot of experience in this space, is, whether we like it or not, direct-to-consumer brands are here to stay, and we're always going to be selling against them. We have to accept the fact that direct-to-consumer brands drive foot traffic into our store where they come to buy. And then ultimately, and Rob's going to take over from me here, is, those bikes need to be serviced, and most of the parts you already have. So what are you doing to drive customers into your store? Rob?
Thanks, Richard. So I'm just this is just a very quick description of my perception of the various riders in this category that might be coming into your store. I think that I break them down into three different groupings. The initial grouping that everybody knows, and these are our existing riders. They're existing customers for most of us. And chances are, if they're an existing rider, an existing customer, they're going to look to a specialty bike retailer, whether an e-bike retailer or IBD, for their bike purchase. So I think that's sort of low-hanging fruit. I think the other two categories are more interesting to me because the rider categories are larger, the opportunity is larger, but there's also more risk with those rider groups. And the first one I call the reactivated rider. So this is somebody that probably rode when they were younger, whether for transportation, fun, recreation, fitness, sport, and a variety of reasons, but for also a variety of reasons, they haven't been riding lately. And now that they've heard about these cool new e-bikes, they're thinking about re-engaging with this sport that they enjoyed when they were a little bit younger. And then new riders, I think this is probably the largest category, and certainly the largest category that the direct consumer brands have attacked. And those are people that probably haven't ridden since they were kids. And now, they're either looking for urban transportation, they're looking for recreation as they're aging out and getting a little bit older. Aging baby boomers, my category, is a large portion of those riders. And the question is, how do you both engage those riders and then show them products that are unique to your store and therefore allow you to capture that sale? And now we're going to toss it over to Tim to talk more about the pipeline and how we actually see new people in the door. Tim?
Thank you. Yeah, so who remembers the Yellow Pages? That used to be our, main pipeline for traffic, placing ads in Yellow Pages or other print media. Now it's transitioned to something that kind of looks more like this. And even the Yellow Pages has transitioned. They still very much exist as a company, and their main source of revenue is actually marketing services. And those marketing services include Google search, directory listings, placing you on Yelp and Nextdoor and voice search, doing live chat. So they, as a company, have really embraced this transition to the digital space. Other areas that we've seen this, People for Bikes did a really great study called the e-bike curious study, where they just asked customers, where are you getting your information? Around 48% said that they're currently looking at Google search as their number one place for information. 41% said that they're planning on going to Google search. But bike shops are incredibly important with this too. 47% said that they plan on visiting a bike shop as part of their journey, and 46% said they're planning on doing a test ride at a bike shop. So this journey really starts online, and then there's a big opportunity for retailers to pull these people into their store. So how does this happen? Today's kind of digital pipeline. I always say you start at the bottom of the funnel and work your way up. I would say a big mistake that I see a lot of brands make and retailers is they just look at the top in Google Ads and they'll be like, oh, we'll just throw our money into Google Ads and all will be good. But you really have to start at the bottom. The main goal of our website is to meet customers where they're at and then provide them a clear and easy way to transition from screen to store. What does that mean? As the e-bike study said, it's test rides, it's service packages, it's everything else that Rob and Richard are going to go into later on in this presentation. But we have to start with a quality website. That's your digital first impression. Then you're working up the ladder, doing local SEO. I kind of group this as like the free stuff. It's time to do this. Making sure your Google My Business profile is up to date, and you're listed on Yelp, and GMC stands for Google Merchant Center. You could actually push all of your retail data or all of your inventory and product data into Google Merchant Center and be listed online that way. You're not paying for those ads, but you are paying for your time. And then lastly, once all that other stuff is in place, you can start investing in some advertising. Paid search, local performance max, which is like advertising on Google Maps and Apple Maps and stuff like that. So when people are searching bike shops near me, your ad appears. So that's sort of the I would say the more modern funnel from digital to storefront, and sort of 3 steps that we have to make. Yeah, be on Google. Make sure you're there and you're consistently there. The address is correct, your phone number is correct, your website's correct, your hours are correct. That's number one. Number two, do your research and make sure that if you are placing ads, that you're placing them in the right spot where your customers are. Your customer the best, but you can also ask them. Say they come into your shop of where they're spending their time online. And then number 3, like once someone comes through your door, like you have such a huge opportunity, and your staff really needs to be comfortable upselling, cross-selling, and getting them on a bike and on one of your bikes, and maybe not necessarily the bike that they came in looking for.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tim. And and before I hand it back over to Rob, it's you can look at the direct-to-consumer brands as part of your digital marketing services and your digital marketing efforts to drive people in your door. But if you're just driving them in your door and you're not converting them, or you're not upselling, or you're not stepping, you're going to be in a really big pickle later on down the road. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. So,
Thanks,
Mr.
Richard.
Rob?
So obviously, we're big fans of letting the Porcupine drive traffic. And I think most retailers have acknowledged that, the major brands do drive traffic. And I would be comfortable saying that, the brands that are represented presenting this webinar are not major brands. We believe that we can provide a great buying experience, great products, great value for the customer and the retailer. But how do you do that? How do you get somebody from them coming in saying, I want XYZ, to you giving them some other options? Obviously, you control the final mile. They came to your store because they don't want to buy online. They want brick and mortar support. And as Tim shared, the majority of consumers do want that brick and mortar support. They want test rides. They want service and support from a brick and mortar retailer. They want to be more fit. They want to do test rides. They want the bike to be professionally assembled and serviced. And if they had felt comfortable buying online, they probably wouldn't have made the effort to walk into your store in the first place. They're buying the experience. Richard?
So, again, Tim mentioned this before, and it's hats off to People for Bike for their e-bike curious study that they did that gives a lot of us great insight into how this new customer is going to shop. But if you look at it, and this is a slide directly from their deck, so I'm not taking any ownership from it. It's all their work. But if you add up those that don't know where they're going to buy, those that are going to buy at an e-bike retailer or buy at a brick and mortar retailer, you have almost 60%, over 60%, actually it's 80%, sorry, of your consumers that are basically saying, hey, I'm not sold on this online experience and I want to go into a shop. So you need to be clear that if that person is walking into your shop, they're doing it because they want to buy from you. But you need to make sure that they're paying you on an apples to apples basis. And we'll go over some strategies a little bit about how to make sure that that happens. So, Rob, you did a presentation a little bit to another group earlier in the month, and this slide comes from that, right? The importance of the dealer.
Sorry about that. So some of you may have seen this. This is a slide that I presented at the CABDA East and Midwest shows. It's something near and dear to my heart. I think it's really important that we all remind ourselves every day of the importance of you, the retailer. And it's very easy to simply become a clerk and hand a consumer what they ask for. And sometimes that's the best solution. I personally think that that's maybe a little bit short-sighted. I think there's more opportunity for you as a retailer to capture lifetime customer value, and we'll talk more about that if you really lean into why they're coming to you in the first place. Obviously, they're coming to you because you can educate them. You can talk about different types of systems, mid-drive versus hub drive. You can talk about safety regulations, which these days are absolutely in the news with good reason and very important. You can talk about class system compliance. Again, in these days, pretty important and in the news. There's a lot of out of class product being sold. There's a lot of product that's being sold that is, they're sort of jumping on the e-bike bandwagon when in reality, they're not at all e-bikes. You can talk about state regulations. You can talk about weight distribution, how an e-bike, it has different weight and needs to be managed. That weight needs to be managed differently. Maintenance needs, system differences, sizing, obviously, in a direct consumer environment. And with most direct to consumer bikes, there's one or two sizes. Most dealer type of e-bikes and bikes have multiple sizes because the more you ride it like a bike, the more sizing is important. I think consumers don't necessarily understand that intuitively, but they rely on a dealer to explain that. Obviously, the big one is demos and test rides. I think that's a really critical point. I'm a big fan of virtual test rides. You've all heard me talk about this probably. Put a bike on a trainer in your store and make sure the consumer gets on the bike, even if it's rainy, cold, et cetera, out there. It allows the consumer to feel the difference between different types of systems. And then obviously after sales service and warranty, ongoing maintenance, technical support, and warranty issues. The studies have shown that e-bike riders actually ride their bikes more than the average rider. And that's really important. And that's why they're coming to you. So in terms of the sales process, Again, this is probably repetition, but I'm a big fan of sales training. I started my career with sales training way back in the day with Schwinn sales training, for those of you that remember Harry Friedman. But it's pretty basic. You ask open-ended questions. You tell me what you know. Where would you like to ride? Who will you be riding with? What have you ridden? Where are you in the sales process? What have you seen that you liked? If you ask them all those questions, they're going to tell you the story of their purchase journey up to that point, and they're going to give you a bunch of information that generally allows you to point at several bikes and say something like, based on what you've told me, I think one of these might fit your needs. And then you talk a little bit about the specific products. I'm a big fan when somebody comes into your store and they're a new rider, and they say they want a throttle. I always think it's a good thing to expose them to a class 1 or class 3 center drive system. And this is a personal belief. Why do you want to do that? Well, the first thing is, if you lock them into something in your store that's not available necessarily direct to consumer, that's an advantage for your store. It gets the consumer to a point where they want a product that they can't buy by clicking a button. It's an higher average sale dollars, generally speaking. And in my view, and what most consumers tell us, is that a class 1 or class 3 bike is a little bit more of a cycling experience rather than, and please don't take this the wrong way, most people that ride class 2 bikes, just want to sit on it and cruise around. One of our best retailers once said that, even with price not an issue, the new customer tells him that people just want to sit on it and cruise around. That's fine. For that consumer, sell them a class 2 bike. But if you expose somebody to a class 1 or class 3 bike, you'll get a significant percentage that will buy up. And why will they do that? Because it feels more like a bike. A center drive bike definitely feels more balanced. It's more of a bike-like experience, and people like to buy nicer things, or you'd never sell anything at all over $1,000. Next slide, please. So, what are the keys to success? Again, this is just our opinion, but I believe that you should stock and display all 3 classes. Why? They're all bikes. They all offer something to everyone. Offer a big tent. We talk about big tent in the bike business not being exclusionary, not being too focused on one type of product. Obviously, if you have a super successful business selling only high-end road bikes, God bless, but there's not many of those around anymore. And the best way to be successful in business, from my perspective, is offer something to everyone. Class 2 bikes, generally speaking, are a little bit simpler, a little bit more intuitive. You sit on it and you twist the throttle and you go. Sometimes they can be less expensive. Class 1 and 3 bikes are, generally speaking, as I said, a little bit more bike-like. They're more balanced because the weight of the bike is in line with the rider. They have easier maintenance because the rear wheel doesn't have anything special about it. So it's a little bit easier to do, wheel maintenance, gear maintenance, etc. And a class 1 or class 3 bike, in my view anyway, is like you, only stronger.
Well, Rob, I think the beauty of us both being on this panel is we can both look at it from a slightly different perspective, because, our company is very much focused on, hub drive as an alternative. And, I think what you and I both bring here is that, they make chocolate and vanilla ice cream for a reason, and not one is better than the other. It's a matter of, what do you want? But what you as a retailer provide anybody walking in your store is the opportunity to sample 31 flavors of ice cream, because you give them that option. And are you going to sell to everybody? No, but you're going to sell to a lot more people if you give them that option than if you just pull whatever they came out for and hand it to them and let them walk out the door. So, we talk a little bit about, I don't have time. It's a busy Saturday. I grew up in Boston working at Belmont Wheel Works, and I can remember Saturdays where you had, 10 people working the floor and you had 30 people stacked up and you had to make hay. And so you were spending time just sending people on test rides and let them sell themselves, right? And that's your perfect opportunity. You know, you say you don't have time to sell to somebody, you do have time to say, hey, did you want to try something else? Here's the bike that you came in for. Would you like to try this Troxus that has a better warranty? Or would you like to try this Bulls that's a center drive? Just not saying you're going to like it, but don't you owe it to yourself to try something different just to make sure and validate that what you came in for is really what you want? And it doesn't take a lot of staff time to do that. It takes a little juggling and managing of licenses that you're holding on to while they're out on test rides. But it validates you as not just being a clerk, but being a service to the community. And then, the easiest thing to do is make them walk through your store to get to that direct to consumer product. So they see that all these other things are available. If you put that direct to consumer e-bike brand or the majority of them right up front when people walk in, do you want somebody to come in and go out? Maybe, but I would think if you're trying to get value out of that foot traffic, which is what the direct to consumer brand is there for you to do, is you want them to spend time and shop and look and acquire the desire to have other things within your store. And then, ultimately let the test ride do the talking. And if they come in for that direct to consumer brand and they really feel it's better, then guess what? We as manufacturers haven't done a great job differentiating our product. And, we need to do a better job doing that. So, Rob, I think this slide that you created, it tells the whole story, right?
Well, thanks, Richard. So just to reiterate what Richard said, so retail 101, everybody's been to a grocery store. There's a reason they put the eggs and the milk in the back of the grocery store. So make the consumer walk through your store and see everything else. And then one other thing that he mentioned, I think it's important to reiterate, is when you talk to a consumer, you're trying to expose them to something else, not necessarily what they came in for. I think the "we hate buyer's remorse" statement is really powerful. And we've got a bunch of people on this call who've been in the bike industry for many years. And I can tell you that in all my years of selling at retail, and I still work retail sales, I did one last weekend. I have heard somebody come in and say, I spent too much on my bike, maybe a dozen times. And it's generally a guy who bought a really expensive road bike that's hanging in the garage and he doesn't ride it anymore. But I've heard somebody come in and say, how much will it cost me to upgrade? Hundreds, if not thousands of times. And if you tell a consumer that story, I promise you it will resonate. So make sure you're leaning into that. A, make sure they walk through the store, and B, talk about "we hate buyer's remorse." Okay, so what does success look like? This is where the money is, right? So this is just a really basic top line analysis of revenue. So this doesn't talk about cost, this doesn't talk about assembly, this doesn't talk about any of that. It's just gross margin dollars. If you sell 100 bikes and the direct consumer brand, the ASP is $1,500 at a 25% gross margin, which I think is about what I hear from most dealers on most of the either mainline IBD brands in e-bike or direct consumer brands. And then a B2B brand, certainly a brand like Troxus or Bulls, gives you ASPs that are higher with a higher gross margin. If you sell all 100 bikes from the D2C brand, that's $150,000 in top line revenue and $37,500 in gross margin, not including assembly cost. But if you sell 50 of the direct consumer brand and 50 of the B2B brand, you increase your top line revenue by $50,000, but more importantly, you increase your gross margin to $63,750, which is pretty significant if you're talking about gross margin, because as we all know, gross margin pays the bills. Margin doesn't do anything until you ring it into your register. And gross margin is the most important calculation when it comes to that. So this is just, again, a basic analysis showing you what the opportunity looks like. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim to talk about the death spiral.
Sure. Yeah, so the death spiral, as we call it, is essentially being beholden to one source of traffic, or one, not even source of traffic, just like one marketing channel. We, as an example, in the digital space, it's like TikTok. Like from week to week, I don't even know if that's going to be a thing anymore. Is it going to be banned? Is it not going to be banned? Is it like you don't know? And so for a lot of our non-bike brands who put all their eggs in that one basket, that's a big risk for them. And so for bike shops, if you're kind of beholden to one source, that brand is driving all your traffic. Then that brand is able to kind of keep pushing on you a little bit more, and kind of squeezing, maybe making more and more demands on you. And so I think the story of the death spiral really is, diversify, and control what you can, which is the shop experience, which is your website, and don't be bold into one channel.
Thanks, Tim. So I tell this story, and I think anybody who follows the industry will acknowledge this, that with the what I call the brand retail roll up that's occurred over the last 10 years or so, where some of the major brands are buying retail, some of them a lot of retail. And I've seen this happen countless times now, where a brand buys a retailer that was multi-brand, owned and operated by the retailer, the owner, and it switches to a mono brand operation that is operated by a manager. And I think the jury's in that multi-brand owner operated drives way more volume and therefore profitability than mono brand, certainly when it's managed by a manager, not an owner. So just one story about why you as the retailer, as the specialty retailer, have incredible value, and you bring value to your customers by talking about how you've made the decisions about what to populate on your store for their benefit, not necessarily for your benefit, for their benefit, by giving them a curated selection of a truly special product experience. Richard?
Yeah, and I'll add a somewhat personal story. At one point, my wife owned a flower store and a flower shop, and like e-bike and IBDs, there was a lot of traffic that was generated by one source. So if you look at this little thing, do you ever remember there was a little emblem on the store door? It said FTD, and FTD was a source that would allow you to go into one flower shop, and then they could send that order to another flower shop across the country, and they could get it picked up, and it was all great. Well, shops got lazy on marketing and trying to drive traffic on their own because they were getting this revenue stream from FTD constantly. It was just like the orders would just come in and, oh, we're just going to fill the orders. We're just going to fill the orders. We're just going to fill the orders. Well, what happened? FTD wound up raising the percentage of the sale they took. They started only sending traffic to stores that they wanted to send traffic to, who was buying their flower pots and their arrangements and was paying their premium marketing services and everything else, and extorting all of the revenue from that sale to the point where you were just churning dollars fulfilling FTD orders. And I see exactly the same thing happening with retailers that are embracing direct-to-consumer brands and not making the effort to upsell and own that consumer. Because ultimately, folks, you need to be the brand that people are consuming. Because regardless of what we do with digital marketing, ultimately you need to create a following and a legion of followers in your community who talk you up. Because when you look at study after study, personal referral is one of the biggest drivers of brand purchasing decision. And so what we're talking about with Hugging This Porcupine is we're using them to bring traffic in, and then we're doing what we do best, selling ourselves and selling our store. So, and we touched about this a little bit earlier in the presentation, there is that guy or gal, that the person who just kind of walks in and says, I want XYZ PDQ. And then you for whatever reason, you don't have time to send them on a test ride, it's raining, whatever, you take them over to the bike. If you are selling that bike for the same price as that customer can buy it direct on the website for, I'm sorry, you're selling yourself incredibly short, because that bike winds up on their doorstep from that shop, from that brand, in a box. If you are not charging for assembly and delivery to take care of your time, I think you need to evaluate why that is. And if I look at, when I walk into an e-bike retailer versus a brick and mortar retailer of analog bikes primarily, the e-bike centric retailer is more likely to have understood that and charge those fees. And the classic IBD, because they're not used to doing it because it was mandated in their owner's agreement that they had to deliver the bike assembled, make sure you're getting an apples to apples comparison. So if they're coming in and the website says $1,200 for XYZ bike, say, yeah, here's the bike in the box. Here, $1,200. Oh, but I want it assembled. Okay, well, the assembly is $150. Make it up, but at least get paid for your efforts. Make sure you're selling them accessories. People need helmets, etc. Embrace the customer. You're starting the journey, right? So even if you're not able to upsell them or transfer them or whatever, make sure you're sowing the seeds of a lifetime of revenue from that customer. One of the reasons I love Tim is we started talking about how online retailers look at customer acquisition cost and strategies, and how they're willing to lose money on the front end to get somebody in the door to be able to sell to them for their lifetime of their experience. And Tim, without going and violating any sort of confidential information that you were privy to, can you give everybody sort of a real brief synopsis of sort of how you look at customer lifetime value and how that plays into sort of marketing decisions?
For sure. So many brands and companies just always look at acquisition and let's just try to get new customers. And there are a lot of studies out there that a new customer is anywhere between 8 to 25 times more expensive than it is to maintain or keep your current customer base. And so, depending on what acronym you use, LTV, lifetime value, is my acronym of choice. But focusing on that is much more efficient for a brand, and that all starts with a really positive experience. If a customer comes in, website, or just interacts with their choice of interacting with your brand, and it's a positive experience, they're going to come back, and they're going to tell friends. They're going to buy again from you in the future. And that LTV just keeps going up and up and up. And it becomes more and more efficient to maintain that sale once you have that loyal customer base. And so that's really the goal. And some of our brands will flat out lose money on their first purchase because they've done the math. They know that within a certain number of months, 70-something% of their customers will come back and on average buy this, and then 4 months later 50% of them will come back and buy X, Y, and Z. And so it's knowing your customers and again meeting them where they're at.
So there are a lot of concepts on this last this slide here that we can argue about whether they're too salesy in techniques, but you need to be aware that they're out there and they can be great margin generators for you. Think about having pre-purchase service plans. Talk about extended warranty protection. In-store financing can be an ability to make the sale, but you can also sometimes make money on actually financing the bike through your store. And then, maybe a husband and wife comes in and they're coming in for the husband, and Rob tells stories all the time of how, somebody came in for one bike and wound up with two, right, Rob?
Absolutely. I think that the thing that I think about all the time with lifetime customer value is it's not just that sale. I mean, I started doing this, way back in the day when I was working retail, and somebody would come in and they'd be shopping me against one of my competitors. And I remember back then we were selling Schwinn High Sierras. That's how old I am. And the suggested retail was $399, and we were selling them for $440. And we had customers all the time who would come in and say, well, the guy down the street selling it for 400. Why are you 440? And I'd say, because we offer you a better overall service and value. But then I would say, but you know what? Even if you buy it from them, come back to me and I'll still service it like you're my customer. And that really stopped the conversation. And I can't tell you how many times the customer would actually buy it from me at the higher price, because I always made the point of saying, I'd rather lose you as the sale and gain you as a customer than have you buy one bike and never come back. So I really believe that if you put forth that everyone who walks in the door is a customer, whether they buy something from you or not, that is going to ultimately build your business.
Great point, Rob. So this is our last slide. Promise there's no more death by PowerPoint after this. Tim?
So let me get off mute here. So I mean, what do you do? Now that you've kind of listened to us blab for about 45 minutes, what do you do in your shop? I think number one, you got to use that Porcupine to drive the traffic. But you do need to have a strong digital experience for your customers. You need to get them from screen to your store. If it's, as I said before, like we're kind of wherever they're at, if it's test rides, if it's service, whatever it might be. That's the number one thing, at least from the digital standpoint, that you have to do. So.
Number two is put the stuff that's low margin in the back of the store, put the high margin stuff at the front of the store.
Number three is make sure you have a draw brand and a profit brand. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, because your average margin will suffer and therefore your store will suffer.
Make sure that your store and your staff can clearly, succinctly, and with confidence explain your selling proposition and why you're the place to execute that purchase.
This is something that nobody on this call has ever heard before. Get paid for what you do. Be proud that you have a store that offers all these services, all this expertise, and don't be afraid to get paid for that.
And lastly is, always be looking for ways to add a couple of more margin dollars into the till. Accessories, prepaid service, anything you can do, every dollar you can put on at the end of the sale is revenue that can help continue to fund your business. So on behalf of, I want to, thank Tim and Rob to, rounding out the panel with you today. They did a great job pulling it all together, and thanks for your time.
This was awesome, everyone. We really appreciate it. I'm still trying to download all of this information because, like you said, some of it is kind of basic things that we all know, but we need to hear it more often, and we need to give ourselves credit for being great salespeople, being an important place for our customers and our community to physically visit and have expert advice. So I really love everything you presented today. We do have a few questions popped into the chat here. So whoever wants to answer, please feel free. And if anyone had more questions, feel free to enter those in the chat or the Q&A right now as well. One point was about test rides. So very important to kind of put ourselves in the customer's mind, right? Like we might be offering a test ride between an endurance road bike and an aero road bike. That's important, that's impactful, but I think we can all picture to a new rider or new consumer in the bicycling space, having a test ride on maybe a class 1 mid-drive bike, the weight of that bike, how it handles, versus that class 2 bike that they had seen online and, they had already kind of made up their mind. Like, that test ride is going to be huge and impactful. So definitely having those bikes available, having our staff trained, and having test ride procedures in place is really important. So question out of that is, what features briefly can staff guide customers to pay attention to when they're making that decision and going for that first test ride?
So
I'll
I'll
let you take
take,
this, Rob.
go ahead, Richard.
No, it's all you, babe.
Okay. I would say that I would focus on the weight of the bike and on the riding experience. I think those are the two things that are most in your face. And, the weight of the bike, obviously an e-bike is heavier than a normal bike, or an acoustic bike, as I like to say. And a hub motor bike has a different weight balance feel than a center drive bike. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm saying that, one feels different than the other. So make sure you talk about the weight of the bike. And then I think maintenance is the other thing that is sort of top of mind for most consumers. And, whether the bike has a center drive or a hub motor, and the quality of the components, I think that the thing that I continue to see on more of the direct consumer brands is that they do take the opportunity to put less expensive components on their bikes in a lot of cases than a more B2B focused bike, whether it's Troxus, Bulls, or any of the other brands that sell exclusively through B2B.
That's a great point. Right. Awesome. Well, I appreciate that perspective. And I think that's something that busy Saturday, like these things we need to have ready in our back pocket to just, that comes out, verbatim. That leads me into the next question too. I think something that for a lot of us in kind of that analog based shop space, this is kind of second nature too, that we might kind of have ready. Like, what do we not love about class 2? What might we think isn't safe? Or, we're looking at that rider who's having a hard time handling a heavier bike in general. They haven't been on a lot. They're the reactivated rider. You mentioned, how do we go from demotivating that rider to saying, we don't carry those bikes. Maybe we don't carry them, we certainly should, but how do we go to making that rider feel welcome in a space where if we don't have that product, we're still validating it and we're still capturing their add-ons and everything else they need service related over the time of that bike?
So I'm going to say the first thing, and then I'm going to pass it to Richard. I think to be successful in the category, you've got to have class 2. I know that, there's a lot of bike shops out there that say, oh, we don't want to sell class 2. And look, I'm a class 1, class 3 guy, and I've been very public about that. But to be successful in the e-bike business, you have to have all 3 options, and you have to be able to show the consumer why all 3 options make sense. Richard?
I don't know if I can really add anything to that, Rob. I think that the issue really is explaining, and asking the customer specifically, why do they want the throttle? And people say, well, I want a throttle. Okay, well, why do you want that throttle? I don't know. Okay, well, or it's because, typically when we do interviews, and why people want to use throttles is they want throttles to get going from a stop sign, right? Or they're afraid that it get bogged down going up a hill and they want to be able to hit that throttle to kind of get them boosted to get over it if their pedaling cadence kind of drops. And then you just, you work around it and you say, hey, look, if you have a cadence sensor on the bike, you may not need a throttle. Or if you ride a bike in a certain way, through the Bosch programming for a Bosch bike or whatever, that you may find out they don't even really want a throttle. They just think they want a throttle because they don't understand how the bike functions. So, all of our bikes have throttles because everybody wants the throttle. So we kind of advocate throttles, self-servingly, but that it's really asking the question of why do you want that?
So kind of back to basics, back to the test ride. That customer that might think they need a tri bike for group rides, like, we understand that immediately. Like, we're here to educate and share. And same for e-bikes. It's just, it takes some time to, kind of get that sales pitch ready and understand that customer too. So I think that's a really important question. Another important question we have too, and I think a lot of us have seen this in the past few years, tips for identifying customers that are coming into our space for a test ride, knowing that they're going to make that purchase online. So as you mentioned before during the presentation, that customer that we can provide everything for, beyond just the bike purchase. This customer, maybe they're, Mrs. DIY, they don't need that, or they don't think they need that. I think I know the answer to this one, but how do we prevent showrooming? And, how do we maybe make a fee for test rides in the case that we have a lot of customers coming to us for that reason? Maybe we're the e-bike shop in our town, and that's just kind of common occurrence. But for those customers that we may suspect of showrooming our business to test ride a bike that they're going to purchase online, how do we best serve them and, kind of capture them for the future?
Rob, you want to take this one?
I'll take a stab at it. Sure. You're not going to prevent showrooming. It's just a fact of life these days, and every consumer has a showroom in their pocket now with their cell phone. And I think once again, I would lean into your store, your experience, what you bring to the table, and the fact that no matter where they buy the bike, you want them as a customer. So I think, the product is part of it. I also am a big fan of accompanied test rides when it comes to e-bikes. I think that's a way to differentiate yourself if you have the staff and the manpower and the time to go out and ride a couple of different bikes, and halfway through the ride, you swap out and let the consumer, they come in looking for a throttle, take a class 1 bike out and just say, look, again, we hate buyer's remorse. Ride this bike. If you like the throttle, then buy the throttle. But I think there's, again, to me, it's about differentiating the store from the experience, the buying experience, differentiating the store in terms of the way you present the ongoing support. We want you as a customer. I'd rather lose the sale than lose the customer. And then at the end of the day, I always in retail fall back on, you've spent some time with that customer at some point, and they get to the point where you're waiting for them to say, I'll take it. They're waiting for you to say, do you want to buy it? And I'm a big fan of asking for the sale in some way, shape, or form. It could be as innocuous as, what do you think? It could be, how are you going to get it home? It could be cash, check, or charge. But ask for the sale, and that's going to bring up, those last minute objections, and try to meet those objections. Again, if somebody is a DIYer and they're going to buy from Amazon or from a brand that sells direct, no matter what, you may be able to change their mind, but either way, you want to leave them with an impression of, this is why my store adds value. And as a rider, we believe that value is worth what we charge. But at the end of the day, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, please come back and see us one way or the other, because we want you as a customer.
Right. We want you to be getting flat tires. We need you to come back.
That's
so
right.
those are great tips. And I think we have time for one more question here. Kind of a comment to question. It would be great if DTC sites could provide assembly fee and cost information, right? So we may see customers come in that aren't prepped for that, and then we might hesitate to kind of drop that information. That might be one hesitation on recouping that cost, ensuring we get paid as well. Is there a benefit to dealers to allow them to set service costs that make sense for them? Perhaps like for the suppliers in the room here, is leaving that off the site, is that omission intentional? Because then, shop A in metro area can maybe charge 175, shop B that's more small neighborhood can scale that cost to what they might normally charge. Let's say it's 125 or 150. Or does that omission lead to missed expectations when that customer's thinking, hey, e-bike shop brand I see online, they have an awesome website, they never mentioned assembly fee. How do we kind of help meet that before it becomes an awkward conversation?
Well, first of all, that is an incredibly insightful question. Whoever came up with it, I mean, God love you for that one, because I'll tell you, it is something that we speak about and have many, many, many conversations about. And I think, ultimately it's a mindset, I think, and I can't speak for the online, direct to consumer focused brands, but I can tell you sort of how we at Troxus look at this.
Mhm.
is, we can either be focused on funneling business through our retailers, or we can be focused on trying to sell things ourselves, right? Direct to consumer brands are fundamentally focused on executing that sell on their own. You are a necessary evil in their connection to the customer, but you're not their best friend, I can assure you, right?
That's
So
fair to say.
it would be hard for them to justify saying, hey, you can expect to pay between $100 to $200 to get this assembled and prepped at your local bike shop. If you want to do it on your own, you save that money. But I know the way we price our things on, how we price goods on our site is we actually take our minimum advertised price and add $100 to let the dealer look like they're giving the customer a deal, right? Because all of our
Okay.
margins are assured at minimum advertised price, not MSRP, but we run our bikes at MSRP, making the dealer look like a hero
We love
rather
that.
than the other way around, right? But it's like, do you want, buy 5, get 1 free? Do you want 20% off? I mean, it's all about how you slice that up and how you communicate it. And
Mhm.
I think that it would be great if the direct to consumer brands, if they really wanted to support your business, would mention that. But ultimately, I think it comes down to you being able to articulate the fact that are you aware that these bikes come in a box when you buy them from brand A or brand V, right? They come in a box, and then you got to put it together. And if you're an expert bike account, maybe you don't need me, right? And then go ahead and go buy it yourself. But if you have any questions or you have any issues, I take care of that for you, right? I eliminate that question in the process.
Perfect. Yeah, I would say we also, I think, have more than kind of workshopping, that specialty cyclist sale technique. Is we all have a lot of people in our lives who are just like most e-bike consumers. They're new to this space. They hear us talk about bikes a lot and zone out. We can even get them in, workshop some of those sales techniques with them, and practice makes perfect. So I really appreciate the, kind of dedication to honing that skill. These aren't new. The threat might be new, or that challenge might be new, but there's so much we can do, and just kind of renew in our own skill sets to really feel comfortable there. So that is about time for us today. I really appreciate you all being here. Rob, Richard, and Tim, thank you. I'm going to pop your information into the chat here too, so folks can contact you. And we do have Rob, for anyone else who will be at the Cabda West Expo. We hope to see you at the Retailer Summit the day before. But Rob will be doing a kind of similar but an in-depth presentation on how to sell premium e-bikes at 1 p.m. That's at Cabda West Las Vegas on the 27th, so day 2. So be sure to check that out if you are going to Cabda, and keep your eye on the calendar for an upcoming list of NBDA events, including more Retail University webinars, supplier syncs, and super webinars. So we appreciate you all for being here. Appreciate your support of the NBDA and our retailers. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.